punya shravana kirtanah hridantasto hyabhadrani vidunoti suhritsatam. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 28, Text 49. Evam vilapanti bhala vipine nugata patim patita padayor bhartu rudatya shrunya vartayat. Evam vilapanti bala vipine anugata patim patita padayor bhartu rudati ashrunya vartayat. Evam vilapanti bala vipine nugata patim patita padayor bhartu rudatya shrunya vartayat. Evam, thus, vilapanti, lamenting, bala, the innocent woman, vipine, in the solitary forest, anugata, strictly adherent, patim, unto her husband, patita, fallen down, padayoho, at the feet, bhartuhu, of her husband, rudati, while crying, ashruni, tears, avartayat, she said. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. That most obedient wife thus fell down at the feet of her dead husband and began to cry pitifully in that solitary forest. Thus the tears rolled down from her eyes. Purport. Just as a devoted wife becomes afflicted at the passing away of her husband, when a spiritual master passes away, the disciple becomes similarly bereaved. Text 50. Chitim daurmayim chitva tasyam patayuh kalevaram adhipya chanu marane vilapanti manodhade. Chitim daurmayim chitva tasyam patayuh kalevaram adhipya chanu marane vilapanti manodhade. Chitim dharumayim chitva tasyam patayu kalevaram adipya chanu marane vilapanti manodade. Chitim, funeral pyre. Darumayim, made with wood. Chitva, having piled up. Tasyam, on that. Patyuhu, of the husband. Kalevaram, body. Adipya, after igniting. Cha, also. Anumarane, to die along with him. Vilapanti, lamenting. Manaha, her mind. Tade, fixed. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. She then prepared a blazing fire with the firewood and placed the dead body of her husband upon it. When this was finished, she lamented severely and prepared herself to perish in the fire with her husband. Purport. It is the long-standing tradition of the Vedic system that a faithful wife dies along with her husband. This is called Sahamarana. In India, this system was prevalent even to the date of British occupation. At that time, however, a wife who did not wish to die with her husband was sometimes forced to do so by her relatives. Formerly, that was not the case. The wife used to enter the fire voluntarily. The British government stopped this practice, considering it inhumane. However, from the early history of India, we find that when Maharaj Pandu died, he was survived by two wives, Madri and Kunti. The question was whether both should die or one should die. After the death of Maharaj Pandu, his wife settled that one should remain and the other should go. Madri would perish with her husband in the fire, and Kunti would remain to take charge of the 5 Pandava children. Even as late as 1936, we saw a devoted wife voluntarily enter the fire of her husband. This indicates that a devotee's wife must be prepared to act in such a way. Similarly, a devoted disciple of the spiritual master would rather die with the spiritual master than fail to execute the spiritual master's mission. As the Supreme Personality of Godhead comes down upon this earth to re-establish the principles of religion, so his representative, the spiritual master, also comes to re-establish religious principles. It is the duty of the disciple to take charge of the mission of the spiritual master and execute it properly. Otherwise, the disciple should decide to die along with the spiritual master. In other words, to execute the will of the spiritual master, the disciple should be prepared to lay down his life and abandon all personal considerations. Text 51. Tatra purvatarah kaschit Sakha Brahman Atmavan Santvayan Valguna Samna Tam Aha Rudatim Prabho Tatra Purvatara Kaschid Sakha Brahmana Atmavan Santvayan Valguna Samna Tam Aha Rudatim Prabho Tatra Purvatara Kaschid Saka Brahmana Atmavan Santvayan Valguna Samna Tam Aha Rudatim Prabho. Tatra, in that place, Purvataraha, previous, Kashchit, someone, Saka, friend, Brahmanaha, a Brahmana, Atmavan, very learned scholar, Santvayan, pacifying, Valguna, by very nice, Samna, mitigating words, Tam, unto her, Aha, he said, Rudatim, while she was crying, Prabho, my dear king. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, S. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. My dear king, one Brahmana who was an old friend of King Puranjana came to that palace and began to pacify the queen with sweet words. Purport. The appearance of an old friend in the form of a Brahmana is very significant in his Paramatma feature. Krishna is the old friend of everyone. According to Vedic injunction, Krishna is sitting in the living entity, living with the living entity side by side. According to the Shruti mantra, Dva Suparna Sayuja Sakayaha. The Lord is sitting within the heart of every living entity as Suhrit, the best friend. The Lord is always eager to have the living entity come home back to Godhead. Sitting with the living entity as witness, the Lord gives him all chances to enjoy himself materially. But whenever there is an opportunity, the Lord gives good counsel and advises the living entity to abandon trying to become happy through material adjustment and instead turn his face towards the Supreme Personality of Godhead and surrender unto Him. When one becomes serious to follow the mission of the spiritual master, his resolution is tantamount to seeing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As explained before, this means meeting the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the instructions of the spiritual master. This is technically called Vani Seva. Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakura states in the Bhagavad Gita commentary on the verse Vyavasayatmika Buddhir Ekehe Kurunandana, Bhagavad Gita 2.41, that one should serve the words of the spiritual master. The disciple must stick to whatever the spiritual master orders. Simply by following on that line, one sees the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Paramatma, appeared before the queen as Brahmana. But why didn't he appear in his original form as Sri Krishna? Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakura remarks that unless one is very highly elevated in loving the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one cannot see him as he is. Nonetheless, if one sticks to his principles enunciated by the spiritual master, somehow or other he is in the association with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Since the Lord is in the heart, he can advise a sincere disciple from within. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 10:10. Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam tadami buddhi yogam tam yenamam upayantite. To those who are constantly devoted and worship me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. In conclusion, if a disciple is very serious to execute the mission of the spiritual master, he immediately associates with the Supreme Personality of Godhead by Vani or Vapuhu. This is the only secret of success in seeing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Instead of being eager to see the Lord in some bush of Vrindavana, while at the same time engaging in sense gratification, if one instead sticks to the principle of following the words of the spiritual master, he will see the Supreme Lord without difficulty. Sri Vilvamangal Thakura has therefore said, Bhakti Stvai Stiratara Bhagavan Yadi Syad Daivena Nah Falati Divya Kishora Murtihi Mukti Swayam Mukti Mukulitanjali Sevatesman Dharmartha Kama Gataya Samaya Pratikshaha. If I'm engaged in the devotional service unto you, my dear Lord, then very easily can I perceive your presence everywhere. And as far as liberation is concerned, I think that liberation stands at my door with folded hands, waiting to serve me, and all the material conveniences of dharma, religiosity, artha, economic development, and kama, sense gratification, stand with her. Krishna Karnamrita 107. If one is very highly advanced in the devotional service, he will have no difficulty in seeing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If one engages in this service as a spiritual master, he not only sees the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but attains liberation. As far as material conveniences are concerned, they automatically come, just as the maid servants of the queen follow the queen wherever she goes. Liberation is no problem for the pure devotee, and all material conveniences are simply awaiting him in all stages of life. नमो ओम विष्णुपदाय कृष्ण पृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी नामने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवसदि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. I humbly bow down to all the Sri Vaishnavas. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to purify myself. So, so Prabhupada has been very elaborate on these three verses. So I'll try to summarize some salient points from these three purports. So in terms of the setting, we are in the fourth canto, 28th chapter, text 49 to 51. So King Puranjana dies in the absorption of the family life, and he is reborn as Vaidarbi, the daughter of Vidarbha, and marries the saintly king Malayadvaja. And Malayadvaja is considered to be the spiritual master, and Vaidarbi is the disciple. And her exemplary wordless service shows the disciple's mood. At the passing of Malayadvaja, the Puranjana, she's weeping, and then the old friend Brahmana appears as the Paramatma to guide. So that's the setting. So in text 428-49, Srila Prabhupada actually compares the grief of a wife to that of a disciple. The core point is a disciple's heart breaks at the guru's disappearance, just like when the chaste wife at her husband's passing. So this is born of loving service. So the Prabhupada says like it's almost as if like how the separation or the bereavement which the wife feels, that is the bereavement or the separation that the disciple feels at the loss of spiritual master. And in text 428-50, from grief to mission, so Prabhupada talks about how the concept of sahamarana. So this used to be called sati, and it was actually abolished by the British. But here, Srila Prabhupada talks about the historical Vedic dying with the husband. It was originally voluntary, but it was stopped because people started forcing and enforcing this, and not out of their own volition. So Srila Prabhupada even gives example about the Madri and Queen Kunti. Both were wives of Pandu, and as Pandu became ill and he passed away, it was Madri who went along with Pandu and did Sahamarana, but Kunti stayed on so that she can take care of her 5 sons. So the application to so how this applies to so Srila Prabhupada also talks about it's better to die than fail the Acharya's mission. So the connection here is the allegorical story, right? So when the spiritual master, what is more important is the Vani Seva, where one adheres to the words of the spiritual master. Srila Prabhupada will elaborate this more on text 2051, but it's better to actually give up one's life than not to take charge of the Guru's work. So Srila Prabhupada was an exemplary acharya in that regard. So he met Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and that one instruction which Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur gave him to go preach this message of Krishna consciousness to the West, he took to his heart, and that became his core life principle. And so he came at the age which is surviving 2 heart attacks and taking all these hardships with nobody to come and take care of him in this country. So he came, established the mission, and then spread Krishna consciousness so that everybody got benefited because of that. And that is fundamentally because of Srila Prabhupada's firm faith in the words of the Guru and adhering to what the Guru instructed him. So that's the message which Srila Prabhupada is conveying here in text 50, where it's better to die than fail the Acharya's mission. So if one is not able to take forward what the Acharya has explained, it's better to die along with the Acharya. So, and that's the connection in this verse with the Sahamarana. So, And in text 51, there is a mention about this old friend or a Brahmana friend, and this is allegorically explained to Sri Krishna Paramatma, or Krishna as the Paramatma feature. So Krishna talks about Sarvasya Chaham Hridi Sannivishto Matas Buddhirganam Apohanam Cha. So Krishna is situated in everybody's heart. In the as the Paramatma, Dvamimo Purusha Loke, Charashtakshara Evacha, Sarasharvani Bhutani Kodastakshara Uchate. So Krishna is present within every living entity's heart, and he is the Suhrit, or the supreme most friend, who's always the well-wisher. And as the because here the queen is extremely distraught that the king is passed away, and she's getting herself ready to put herself in the funeral pyre. And there, at that time, and the old Brahmana, who is the allegorical reference to the Krishna Paramatma, is coming and is counseling, and he's the witness, and he lets us choose at any. Srila Prabhupada says that at any given opportunity, the Paramatma, who is just a witness, comes to give the spiritual instruction to help us get back to the path of like spiritual realization. And so Srila Prabhupada also exemplifies this and says that if one wants to see Krishna, it is not possible to see Krishna face to face. Srila Prabhupada quotes examples from Billamangal Thakur, from Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, and he says this particular verse, Vyavasayatmika buddhi ekehe kuru nandana, bahushaka hi anantascha, buddhya avyavasayina. So in the Bhagavad Gita, second chapter, 41st text, it's mentioned that Vyavasayatmika buddhi. So that one-pointed focus, Srila Vishwanath Thakur Chakravarti Thakur explains this one-pointed focus as dedication and surrender to the words of the spiritual master. So sometimes it is very when we are in the midst of practicing Vairi Sadhana Bhakti, we actually forget like how important the words are, right? So if you think about the Diksha or Siksha, anything which happens in in this tradition is through the words. The words carry so much importance, and especially the words from the spiritual master are actually the ones which will lift one from this samsara. And Srila Prabhupada emphasizes this fact, saying that if one takes the spiritual master's words as one's life and soul, that is called Vyavasayatmika Buddhi. And those who are steadily devoted to receive the Buddhi Yoga from within, so Srila Prabhupada talks about this verse in Tesham Satati Yuktanam Bhajatam Priti Purvakam Tadami Buddhi Yogam Tam Enamam Upayantite. So Krishna becomes the Paramatma and gives the instructions from within the heart. So even though the words are from the spiritual master, but the realization comes from within by Krishna. So that's the point which is mentioned. And and Srila Prabhupada also gives a very staunch warning that just associating with the spiritual master, taking his blessings, but also doing sense gratification aside is not going to help us see Krishna. But one has to stick to the instruction, and then by following the instruction of the spiritual master, the Lord becomes evident in the heart. And Srila Prabhupada talks about this quote by Vilmangal Thakur from Krishna Karnamrita, where when bhakti is firm, mukti and all material conveniences follow like attendance. So this is explained in the Nectar of Devotion, and this point came to my mind that there are characteristics of devotional service, and there are 6 characteristics of devotional service. So one of the characteristics is Shubhada, Kleshagni, Shubhada, Moksha Lagudakrit, Sandranana Visheshatma, Sri Krishna Akarshani. So first characteristic is Shubhada. Shubhada brings all auspiciousness, and it's Moksha Lagutakrit. Moksha Lagutakrit is like typically people are after 4 things: Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. But the process of devotional service is so good that it makes moksha insignificant. That's why it's called moksha lagutakrit, and it's sudurlabha. It's not easily obtained by everybody. So these are all characteristics, and Srila Prabhupada says and quotes these to say that if one sticks to the instructions of the spiritual master, to the word, then Krishna becomes visible. It may not be visible just like how we would see him in his universal form or in his 400 form, just like what he showed to Arjuna. But Rather, just by following the words of the spiritual master, Krishna becomes evident, just like how Krishna has come as taking the form of a Brahmana. Krishna will come in the form of instructions, Krishna will come in the form of intuitions, and then help us get more clarity in this path of spiritual realization. So those are some of the points I could gather on these three verses. They were very self-evident. So Prabhupada had very beautiful purports on them. So